Welcome to Philly Coco presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 92. This is a developer's journey into making cool stuff. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a cocoa-based, my Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development that primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, watchOS, and visionOS development. Philly Coco's true desire is to take you higher on your own developer journey. Whew. All right, well, that's two times in a row.
You know, it is possible. We could just redo it, but if you're hearing me say that, then we didn't.
I just like the fact that we just don't bother. I think it's
we don't. Who cares?
That's just the charm of this.
We're going to talk about that later, maybe a little bit about trade-offs and like when to choose proper craftsmanship and effort and when not to.
As long as you get it right for episode 100.
That's right. That one has to be perfect.
Yeah, we have to keep that one as tight and perfect as possible.
Yeah, we're gonna start thinking about one. It's coming up.
Yeah. Oh, geez, it's not. It's coming up pretty quickly. We just have to make it to 8 more episodes somehow magically. But what do we have on? Speaking of topics, what do we have on topic for today? I guess we're just more or less doing this. Think of it. I think the way I'm going to look at this particular podcast is much more of an update of where we are with our little side project, which is what we are currently codenaming it Bento Fit. And Steve, if he can give our listeners a TRDL, what this app actually is supposed to do.
Okay, so Bento Fit, the story so far is this is probably something you could vibe code over a weekend, but we do it the old-fashioned way. No, not really. We're trying to just build a simple dashboard application on iOS primarily to surface metrics from HealthKit database that we find useful to ourselves and that aren't necessarily surfaced the way we would like them to be in like the health app or something else. And the conceit was, at least at first, is that the three of us are 3 different areas on a fitness journey. Between Kotaro, who like walks and does step counting, that's his primary fitness regimen, and like eating low-fat chips instead of like full-fat chips while watching Netflix.
That's not true. Watching Netflix is the truthful part. The low-fat is the untruthful part.
Low-fat chips are terrible. It's not worth it. But Kotaro walks, and so he's not doing a specific fitness regimen. I work out, and I'm trying to get it to be consistent like 5 times a week. I'm right now between like 2 to 5, depending on factors, usually around 3. And that's weightlifting and cardio kind of alternating. And then we have Aaron, who is the most fit of us all, can run triathlons. He may be the fittest man in his age bracket in the Northeast, at least.
Climbed Mount Everest.
He climbed Everest once. I heard this story. He climbed Everest, and then he just came down. You know that like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation style? He just had the metal dish, and he just sat on it and just zoomed down at lightning speed. It was a fantastic. There's some YouTube video somewhere, I'm sure of it, right, Aaron?
It was
video, definitely.
Yeah.
But Aaron is the most fit of us all, and he and so the idea was we all would be interested in different metrics, and so we would be able to surface them. And we have a working app. I mean, it does work. We're just kind of trying to polish it up at this point, really, and add some more features like widgets and stuff. And the biggest thing leading up to today was we finally got the loading issues addressed. I mean, it's not necessarily finished because it was just the first draft of it. We'll talk about it, but that's what I was doing, was getting it to load. It doesn't take like 15, 20 seconds or whatever load now. It just immediately loads.
Now, how did you manage to do this when you didn't spend most of your time throughout our sprint, quote unquote, this 2-week sprint, and you did this in one day? This bit of work in, what, one day? Is that a fair assessment?
I did it like in 20 minutes before this podcast. This afternoon before dinner. Yeah, I was leveraging the power of LLMs.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we want to get into that now. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah. We can dive in.
Okay, so this is a combo update about BentoFit and also returning to the discussion of using LLMs in programming. So, I'll bring it up here on the screen for the listeners. You have to use your imagination.
Yes,
that I am.
We don't do video.
So you'll be able to download this app
someday. But I'm going to bring up
too far from now.
Yeah, I'm bringing up the pull request. So the goal here was, why the hell is it taking so long to load? Pretty much I figured that it was because we were using probably wrong APIs in HealthKit and just grabbing too much data, and we're probably having an async issue because we had a bunch of stuff from HealthKit. We were calculating things, and we were waiting till all of them were done before we were updating. So it was like those three things. So I opened up Aider, currently my favorite little tool to use for this. I know it's funny, no one really talks about Aider. I see a bunch of videos online about Claude Code and like Codex and like Open Code and
just
whatever.
Recently, Gemini
CLI.
Yeah.
And then if you're lucky, they might kind of flash on screens like, oh yeah, Aider exists. But anyway, I like Aider. I've talked about it before. If you're going to use a command line tool, I like it because if you're just working on this app, it's a pair programming type of metaphor. So I go into the ask mode. That's what I did here. And that means it will not write anything. And so that's when you can just kind of think about your idea and try to get the LLM to spit out a plan. And then when you're ready to do it, you go to the code, you just say /code and do it, and then it does it and updates the files. So I like working that way.
Is it closer to, because what you're doing is basically saying, hey, are you putting it sort of in like a scratch file of sorts of saying, hey, these are the general changes we're gonna experiment with, and then once you feel comfortable with the actual code itself, you let it code it completely for which then you build and compile and see if it actually runs, right? Is that the flow? I
mean, the ask and code modes in Aider are just, you're still just talking. You're still just sending input to an LLM and getting output, the same output you would get anyway. It's just that Aider prevents the files from being changed.
Right.
So, the way I use it is to plan out the change first. So you can do it back and forth if you want. You can come to a decision.
It's not
like having a chat.
Something. Yeah, so it's not in a sense of like, what do they call it, like an agent mode in that sense,
well,
where you're.
That's the thing. Aider kind of predates what people think of as a Claude Code style agents, but it is kind of an agent thing. Like it's wrapping whatever LLM models you use, and it has a bunch of functions, a bunch of ways of interacting with them. It kind of puts guardrails around them, styles of using them, and like there's the architect one, which has like two models, one for like thinking whatever, one for like writing stuff. There's like the ask mode and the code mode, and then the idea you have to add the context in specifically, but it will also kind of agentically, also try to like preemptively say, oh, I need this file. Do you want to add it into the context? So it does. It's kind of like, it's not as automatic as something like Cursor was when we were doing that, or Claude Code, for instance, where it's just very much acting on its own accord. This is more like you're driving everything as a programmer. That's why I like it. So you're telling it, it just makes it a little easier for you to basically use kind of a chat interface to design some change, and then you can execute the change. And then if you want, by default, Aider does this, but you can turn it off. It's very configurable. Then it'll like check in every change that you make in Git with a little message, and it even tags it as being co-authored by Aider, so you can see in the history. And some people turn that off, which you can, but it kind of depends on your style of using it. The way I try to use it, I try to do like one atomic change at a time, so that if I want to undo it, I can undo it without messing around with too much history in Git. And I'm allowing it to do the automatic Git commits because I actually find it pretty convenient, because it's like a universal way of having undo available. That's not too bad, and other programs might do different things to have the undo be available. So anyway, I went in and I was asking, I put as input in the LM. I was like, this is slow, it's loading slow, and I added the files that were related to the HealthKit model and integration we built. And I was like, this is loading really slow. Like, what are things it can do to improve the performance of it? And also, this is my first time using Claude 4 Sonnet. And it looks like when you use that model, even through OpenRouter, Aider picks it up and says, and I think it sets 3.5 haiku as the writing thing, as the writing model. It's a little unclear exactly which thing's writing files. I'll have to look at the history, but Anyway, so this is my first time using Sonnet 4, which is really expensive. Like, I was messing around with this with Flash, preview of Google Gemini 2.5 Flash before, which was like so cheap, it was almost nothing. I mean, I spent like 20 minutes and spent almost $2, which is like a lot when you start extrapolating like how, and that was me being very careful and not trying to throw excess context in there or whatever, or like have the thing just do things automatically. It's me trying to be very specific. It's still half an hour or whatever of that, and I was like, oh my God, I'm already up to $2. So you can see how it could add up really fast. But I got to tell you, it did a good job with, I like the formatting, the output of it. This one and Grok are the ones I like the formatting out of the most so far, in my experience. 2.5 Pro has been hit or miss for me lately. I don't know. These models get changed all the time. So anyway, I was using Sonnet 4, which everybody loves, and I asked it for these changes. So at first in Ask mode in Aider, gave me a bunch of changes, gave me like the top like 3 things or whatever, and then we just started doing them. So if you look at the pull request, the history here, you can see some of these changes here. I think this is all from today. I don't know what order these are in. Okay, so this was what we did before. This was earlier. So one of the things I did was we did a tiered loading performance. That was the one thing. So we're moving towards having all of the individual HealthKit data load asynchronously per card, but that's not how our app view, our main view right now works. It works by having a single task that loads the data and then updates the UI, from an observable. So this split that into, and I'm not sure this is the best design. I don't, it uses 2 booleans, which I don't like. So, but it did split the loading and the data from the stuff that's critical. What it thought was critical, but things that like is the stuff that wasn't historical data, and so stuff like what is a current resting heart rate or whatever, like that was considered critical. The historical stuff was the things we were making charts out of, basically. So it split it into two categories, and then kind of did the loading and for each one basically as quickly as it could. And then when it was done, the critical load, it says it's done. Then it would load the non-critical stuff, like it's separate in a separate a function. So when you go to the app view, we'll have to see that. Look at the files. So then when you go to app view, it changed. The app view is the main view that it's like our version of the content view in the default app side. Yeah, that's what we call it. So we have somewhere in here, we have the text is so small. Command plus. I know, seriously. Where is the task? Anyway, in the app view, we have a task thing. So you can see loads card data, and then it changed it to the observable model we were using. It sets a boolean, so when the critical data is loaded, it uses an onChange modifier.
Interesting.
So when the critical data is loaded, then it calls our load card data function on the view, which is what actually updates the UI. So it basically calls the load card data a bunch of times, which actually kind of makes sense. This reminds me of UIKit though.
Yeah.
So we might be able to fix this a little better. But using onChange like this is actually pretty common. You want to wait. You want when something's ready. But, so use some onChange to load things when the critical data is loaded, and then again when the historical data is loaded. And so that helped a little bit, but that wasn't the main thing. Like the main problem was, well, that wasn't the thing that really made it speed up. It was, well, we changed it. We changed some stuff, so we got less data back. That was the main thing.
Right.
That was probably
I think it was like an HK. You changed it from like something.
This is probably what made it the fastest. We changed, so some of the stuff we were using this HK statistics collection query.
Yeah.
And instead we switched it to an HK sample query. And I didn't actually look at the documentation to see what the differences are. But
of course not.
Yet. We haven't checked it in yet. It's just in the PR. But the data still seemed accurate when I was doing a spot check. And it's a lot faster. Like according to Sonnet,
it is.
It is
a
a
lot
faster API, because we were basically just grabbing a huge amount of data and then letting HealthKit calculate it. And apparently that's a lot slower than if you do this API and you get these samples and then you do the math yourself, which is what it does down here when it groups samples by day. So instead of the chunking, it just does it here. So that actually made it, that was most of the change. And then I also made a few adjustments to the step graph. We changed it to like 3 days, so it wasn't as much. That doesn't really matter. The weight, I changed the weight visualization to be a change in weight change instead of absolute weight, so that you can actually see something in the graph. And then we had a little quote unquote discussion about what the best visualization was for like motivation. And 30 days, or should I make it 2 weeks or something? But no, I left it 30 days, so even if you have only slight variations, you can see them. And instead of giving your weight, it's actually giving you plus or minus, pounds per day in a little graph and on the y-axis. And so that actually works pretty well. And then I haven't gotten very far yet, but then I started looking at other HealthKit data, and I started looking at using different models with the same query. Claude gave me like a bunch of options, and the Gemini 2.5 Pro gave me like 3. So I don't know. Very different output that time, but I haven't implementing that stuff. But so that's the main difference was changing the HealthKit APIs we were using, reducing the amount of the scope of what we were calling. So instead of getting all heart rate data, for instance, I think it just got like the last few days or something, the last 50 most recent samples. Here we go. So like for the heart rate one, we were doing no query, no limit when we were getting resting heart rate data. So like on my HealthKit, I have years worth of resting heart rate data. So no wonder it took so long. And because we don't need that many. We only need 50 is a reasonable number to start with. By just limiting it to 50 cut a couple seconds off right there. So it was not a lot of effort to get much higher requests because I knew it was mostly async stuff. And then the only other thing I think I did was we kind of optimized the app. We did progressive UI updates. Let's see what did it do for us. This is when it added those on change modifiers.
Yeah. Because
I was trying to get the UI to update as quickly as possible with anything. So even if the graph is like blank, and what we could do is update the card so it has like a spinner or loader or something, or it says something in there while it's loading. But at least now I open it up, it's basically immediate when it's not, the debugger isn't trying to attach, and it just like pops up and then maybe it loads the graphs a second later. But even then, that stuff's just happening instantaneously on my phone now.
And a lot of that we can tweak. I'm almost inclined to think like it's
no cache
too
either.
Fast. So I almost want to like start it in like a certain size and let the things fade in a little more gradually. So that I can take care of.
Yeah, I might do that. So the loading issue is, I wouldn't say it's totally resolved, because I can say like I don't like some of the code is a little sloppy, but it basically took the patterns we had already established in our functions for HealthKit integration and just changed a few lines here and there to use different APIs. It didn't fundamentally change like our algorithm really or anything, like any quote unquote algorithm we're using, because there's only so much HealthKit example code that these things are trained on. So they always do the same thing.
The one thing that I do think is kind of an interesting, nice addition was the idea of like offloading the logic we could do on our side if we can do it faster.
Yeah, that was surprising that worked, because I expected HealthKit to do the processing faster, but I guess with the APIs we were calling, there was just a lot more data being done, and maybe the HealthKit is just slower to ask it to calculate stuff, because everything with HealthKit is kind of slow for whatever reason, because it's like a system level database, and there's no like I don't know how the operating system decides when to prioritize it versus other things. So it was remarkable. We went from like, I don't know, at least 10 to 12 seconds, I think, loading, and down to practically instantaneous. So that was cool. Although it did. Yeah, continue.
I think the next step of this would be ideally, and this is what we talked about earlier, was like migrating all that loading to each particular card. and let the
I already
cards
have an idea for that because I mean I've done that before. Usual approach I'd probably take is each view, like the card. We have to make sure that the card view itself loads its own data. So we'll probably pass in like a closure or something, and then in its own task is where it can load the data. Because otherwise, it's the way we have it now is the containing view is loading the data. So we'll just have to do some more refactoring.
Because it makes sense, right? Because like what we're doing is saying, because the dashboard itself is customizable, you can have.
We don't know which things are going to be there.
Right. We don't know. So it might as well be the responsibility of each of the cards to like say, hey, if I'm here, boom, on in it or whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, if we're passing in the function that does a loading, that also gives us an entry point if we really have to optimize.
Yeah.
If we really have to optimize for the order in which stuff loads, we could figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in that sense, like that part I feel like is not too hard. I feel like
or we could do it through the environment. Like there's different ways of doing it. Like if we pass in stuff as a closure, that's one way. You do it through an environment variable and have it be a black box from the containing view. But it depends on what you want and whether you want that like injection point.
Kind of want it to feel like I want it to be slower because I want it to.
We could do that. That's easy. We're good at making it slow.
I mean, what's funny is like even though it did the thing we asked it to do. Visually, I was like, oh, it comes back too fast. So from like, oh, I'm like my eye's not caught up yet kind of feeling. Like it takes a few seconds to like, oh, okay, this is we're everything's there and it's great. But
we should have some kind of visual indicator that it's done loading and this is up to date information.
Yeah. Or just like a nice smoother transition.
Or just a fade in or something.
Yeah, just like fade in. Maybe even like the text like starts to, the number goes up kind of thing. Where
maybe just make an animation with a long like time.
Yeah, long delay. Maybe slide in the bento box. There are a lot of things that I'll take responsibility to do. I mean, performance is performance. So like the key thing is just make sure that the user doesn't feel disoriented when they are coming in for the first time. And that's
right.
That's
and so the other thing I did here is the commit message in the PR is also generated by the Sonnet, where I asked it to give me a squash commit message.
Nice.
And so it gave me this feat : optimize HealthKit data loading performance with tiered loading and query improvements. Then it gave me a bullet list of stuff of the Git commits that Aider made, basically.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I just copy and pasted that in there because I didn't want to write it all.
You can refresh that page. You can see, and if you do that, you'll see a nice little checkbox. Apparently, it doesn't do that immediately, so you're free to merge that in there if you want.
We should squash merge.
Squash and merge. I approved it while we're doing the review.
So squash and merge, automatically puts GitHub automatically puts in all the individual. So you were asking about this, Aaron, about we should say that the Aider was one of the things that actually outputted the code.
Yeah.
So GitHub does this, although it's annoying that it's repeating like multiple times. Look, and then it puts at the bottom. It's too many. I think we need to delete.
I'm pretty sure we won't pay.
Condense that down to one time.
Yeah. You can ask Aider to condense it down.
I'm not gonna ask Aider. I'm just gonna ask. We're gonna do this live. I'm gonna go over to see if am I logged into T3 chat. Okay, we're on GPT 4.0. I'm gonna paste this in, and I'll be like, condense this down by removing extra co-authored by lines. Leave line at the bottom intact. If I could type. Let's see if this works.
Okay, here we go. All right. I don't know if it changed anything, but
I don't know what happens when I
did remove the stuff.
That's all I wanted to do is, did it hallucinate anything?
We're not even paying attention.
I think that's usually good about just editing things. It's like when you ask it to create new stuff. That's when it just makes stuff up.
There we go. So then so there we go. And that that's a good use of this. I'm going to squash and merge and boom.
Now it's in the main. Excellent. and now I can bring it into my repo, or my branch, I should say. So I created a branch that I had basically was trying to experiment to see how the UI would work in iOS 26. True to form, the nav bar was opaque, kind of like a white, basically. And what that happens is that it will respect that white background on the nav bar, but it will look weird. You won't get those translucent nav bar buttons at the top, which we had 2 nav bar buttons. Now, in this case, it actually does pretty well. It does. When I removed that background, everything seems to fit much nicer. And that's pretty much all the work I had to do.
It's not very glassy looking, though.
It's not glassy looking unless you look carefully at the nav bar button here. If you notice, there's a little bit of refraction happening.
Okay. It's hard to see over a compressed screen share.
Yeah. So if I'll like slow it down a little bit for
yeah.
And then you can kind of see like the distortions happening right there.
That's cool.
So it's very subtle. Also, the navbar title, which is custom, comes back. It kind of like it disappears in the initial version until I remove that navbar button. But now the custom fonts and all that comes back, which is nice. And it kind of looks pretty nice when it's like, because I'm defaulting it to like the navbar, I forgot what they call it, like the large navbar title, which is like the default Apple, like if you use the template, it's the default thing, and everybody converts that to inline almost immediately. But this is kind of nice to keep because when you scroll up and then it kind of turns into the inline, it has this kind of nice progressive blur.
Yeah, so you can still kind of see the title, but it's subtle.
Yeah, it's very subtle. It's a frosty glass look on top, underneath because we have like two navbar items on the top right toolbar,
and you have them connected.
Yes. Well, they're in the toolbar. Yeah, they're connected because they're in the toolbar. I forgot what that trailing.
They're both trailing.
They're both trailing, and they both are like back to back. So if you say toolbar trailing and then you like put two toolbar items back to back, they kind of are stuck together in like one little pill size UI, like button UI, and then you press it here, and then you kind of have the same thing that happens with if I open up any of the sheets, they have the same kind of frosty navbar title. So in a way, there's very little work we need to do going forward in terms of like iOS 26 work. If we wanted to just focus now completely on the UI here within the bento box, I am okay with leaving this part alone. I might even reduce it down depending on like what kind of interactions we do within the dashboard themselves, because there's in the 2 nav bars, there's like the settings button, the settings view, and the manage card view. That's it. So I don't necessarily want to do too much in that space. And in this case, like the manage card view is really kind of like a debug view, because we're really just saying, okay, which health data items are we showing on the dashboard, and then we can just kind of like check them in and out. And that's the only role that sheet serves.
Well, theoretically, I don't think it actually works here.
No, it doesn't work. Yeah, but theoretically, that's the goal. So my for the iOS 26 stuff, it's going to be tough for us to do. I'm going to stop sharing. It'll be tough for us to do any work since outside of that branch until both of you can upgrade some particular device.
I thought about
iOS 26.
I thought about trading in my iPad Mini, or there's a sale on iPad Minis right now on Amazon. I mean, maybe I can like sell mine or something, recoup some of it. But iPad Mini might work, but then it's going to run it in that weird compatibility mode, which sucks. So, like the cheapest iPhone, maybe I could find an iPhone that's not, but everything's so freaking Apple stuff's expensive. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, honestly,
and I'm going to upgrade my phone when 17 comes out, so I don't want to buy a 16 now when it's a few months away from the 17 with the big changes supposedly that I actually want.
It's never a good time to buy.
It's never a good time to buy right after Dub Dub.
Especially now.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that attitude. It's
now.
Never a good time to buy.
But especially now. Yeah, this is like the worst period of in between period you can ever. You know how like Mac Rumor has this buyer guide, and the buyer guide actually has they have like a products thing where like they break down every product and they tell you like based on the rumors and the cadence of the updates, they give you a recommendation whether you should buy it or don't buy. And if I'm looking, if I'll bet you a bottom dollar with the iPhone, it's literally don't buy.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
Yeah, Mac Rumors buyer guide. But yeah, so the interesting thing about the Liquid UI part is that if you're where are we? It
says caution.
All right, so not too dangerous right now, but yeah,
approaching end of cycle.
Yeah,
average is 365 days, or 290.
The strange thing about this UI or Liquid UI is that if you do too much custom work with your nav bar or your tab bar particularly, that's where you're going to struggle. And especially if
I know that pain.
Particularly if your brand identity is really locked in from associated with the with the tab bars and the nav bars, you're going to have a time. Looking at you, Airbnb, but yeah, you're not going to have a good time.
Yeah, they have very custom buttons.
Yes, they're nice, but yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. Yeah, so my goal for going forward is to get the dashboard interactions working, as well as like toggling different data items so that we can actually customize them. That'll be my goal, at least for the next sprint. I don't know if you have anything I don't think you've done anything for this sprint. You haven't had time to do anything. Is that correct?
No, I have not. Now I have to try again to see if I can get my workout stuff merged with all the updates.
Oh yeah. I mean, really.
What did you add? Well, you have a branch or something?
No, I don't. I have a local branch, and I keep every time I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna update it this time," and then there's a whole bunch of changes to the model.
Well, what are you doing so I don't step on you?
No, it's fine. It's just I'm trying to like get this workout stuff as like more of a trend instead.
Yeah, okay. Because I started vibe coding some of that today, and I abandoned it completely because it completely effed up our view.
You are experimenting a lot in the vibe coding space, and you're not really full vibing. You're more or less I don't know what the description is because there's layers to it, right? You're more like a pair programming, pair vibe, or I don't know, vibe pairing. Is there a close enough term? you're half dipped in the vibe. Aaron, I assume you're not even touching the vibe. You're not even like
I'm not
whipping it
using cursor and stuff and like fully generate. I'm not doing the full LLM thing that some people are doing nowadays, but
okay.
I am using I'm using the stuff for refactoring purposes primarily because that's where I think is useful. Just before we get to the last topic, I was going to say for coming up next, I guess I have more of this like polishing up the performance refactors, and also we were talking about making the views all load independently.
Yeah, that would be useful.
Yeah.
I think the only other thing that I think from your side, either of you, is just getting all the data points that we want in place, so then we can kind of like finish up and say, okay, these are the things we want, and I think we have them listed in one of our.
We have a list, and also in GitHub, and I was also using the LLM to kind of brainstorm like options too. Between Aaron and I, I'm sure we can solidify that list because we want a few more things in there for people to pick from.
Yeah.
You should be able to like pick from like all the possible workout types.
Because I'm trying to think of the other, if there's a way we can like categorize them at least so that when the managed card section, we can kind of like say, okay, this is nutrition, or this is, I don't know, just basic walking.
Well, I mean, that's what I was trying. That's why I started kind of going down that path of trying to identify with an LLM to what things are in there that are available, and then I was gonna like then we can try to categorize them too. That's one of the things these tools are good at is categorizing stuff. So we could we could do that, and also because we have our own kind of overarching categorization of level and the fitness journey, so we can also kind of put them on that axis as well if you want to. So there's kind of different ways that we can categorize this, and we just have to basically tag them that way.
So we should generate a dashboard based on the three. Use the foundation model to generate to allow you to enter in like, this is me, this is the kind of thing that I want, and then say, okay, I'm gonna somehow allow the users to just enter in just a basic description of themselves, and then we will generate a dashboard based off of that description.
Yeah, that could be our iOS 26 exclusive feature.
Yeah. I thought we were already iOS 26 exclusive.
But exclusive feature, or that only works on the
yes
with iOS 26.
True. Yeah, you cannot.
Well, we're not like. Yeah, I mean, making it, we're going to probably target iOS 26 for simplicity, but that's not the same thing as saying, like, because it'll still run on iOS 18. Well, it'll still run on phones. It'll still run on phones that don't have the foundation model, but it won't, right?
That's
because
true.
there's iOS 26, because iOS 26 will run on like my 14 Pro. You know what I mean? So it'll run on phones. It's like an exclusive 26 plus Apple Intelligence feature, I guess I should say.
Right.
They made things complicated with that Apple Intelligence split in the lineup. If you want to use it, it's like
right.
It can now. It's like now there's features that work in 18 or 26 if you have an Apple Intelligence one, and things that work in 26 only if you have Apple Intelligence. And it's just getting increasingly confusing. Eventually, it'll be sorted out because everybody will have a newer phone, but.
Right. If you have an iOS 15 Pro or above and an iPad 1 or above.
Yeah, which is most people, honestly, at this point, I think.
And a Vision Pro, and I don't know, watch OS, but whatever. Yes. All the
whatever. So that's cool. So before we wrap things up, we got like a few more minutes. We were discussing this a little earlier, and I wanted to bring it up again at the end here, because what's been in the zeitgeist lately on the interwebs, on the social media hellscapes, has been this discussion of this paper, this MIT Media Lab paper that came out. Let me share my screen so we can understand what I'm talking about. It was this paper, Your Brain on ChatGPT, Accumulation of Cognitive Debt When Using an AI Assistant for Essay Writing Task. And I'm not going to go into the whole paper, but basically their results were like, basically if you use an LLM to write for you, you're not going to remember the things that it wrote. They were basically what you would expect to happen if you outsource your thinking and you outsource your effort to a machine. Then if you need to recall like the thing you produced, you're gonna have a harder time. And I think the same thing applies to programming, because I see programming as a kind of writing. And I think it's actually important that code be written in certain ways. Mm-hmm. And it depends on a lot of factors, including like the platform, the language, and everything. You need to be able to read code later. You, future you, other people. And right now, and these LLMs have been all trained on human written code primarily. I do fear for the day when it's all LLM slop that they've been trained on, so it just keeps regressing to the mean of slop. But that's a whole other discussion for another day. But, it's important that the code be written to be able to be read, and sometimes it's often important that it's be written in various levels of efficiency, whatever that means in your particular case. And also, even more related to this paper, I was thinking, I quote unquote wrote this code today. Mm-hmm. I had an LLM generate it, really, and then I kind of reviewed it. But I can't like reproduce it right now. Like if you asked me just to reproduce it right now, I probably couldn't out of memory because I didn't actually type it. It's just like if you are learning, vocabulary words or something when you're in school, if you don't go through the effort of writing them down and practicing it over and over again, it's not going to stick as well in your mind most of the time. I think the same thing happens here. Same thing you see in this paper. If you let the machine write English text for you, you're going to have a harder time remembering or quoting anything that you quote-unquote wrote. Same thing here with programming. And if you're trying to learn something, this is a trade-off. If I want to become an expert in HealthKit, I have to write the code myself. I could use an LLM to help discover the documentation, figure out what APIs maybe are available to maybe point me in the right direction of where to read documentation or whatever. There's like things you can use for, but I need to actually not just copy and paste, but like figure it out. Ideally, figure it out myself, old school, and write it myself if I really want to become an expert at it. But do I want to become an expert in HealthKit? Like for this project, no, I don't think any of us want to become an expert in HealthKit. We want this thing to work, to be out in a certain time frame, and to be, have the code be written well enough that it's not, terrible and it's not causing performance problems and it's definitely not having security problems or whatever. But do we need to be experts in the entire framework of HealthKit? Are we building a really complicated HealthKit app? No. So maybe this is the case where it's okay that I'm trading off deep expertise in those APIs for faster code generation that works. But I think that it is, I think the whole industry, all the people are super excited about AI and LLMs are not thinking through the logic of using this. And maybe they just are not self-aware enough, if I'm being generous, to realize that if you just outsource work to machine, just like if you were to, and Cal Newport has a video I just saw posted coincidentally today. ChatGPT is making you dumber? ? Here's and he has a discussion about it. And one of the metaphors brought up in there was working out. If you go to the gym and lift weights, it's difficult and hard and not pleasant all the time, but little by little you get stronger. If you go to the gym with a forklift, have the forklift lift the weights for you, in the same amount of time, you can get a whole bunch more weightlifting done, but you haven't helped yourself get healthier. You haven't helped yourself get stronger. Same thing applies to intellectual labor. And in programming, I do fear what's going to happen if too much of the actual labor part of intellectual labor is outsourced to a machine, because you both need to already need to have done the labor to a certain level of experience to be able to use these tools to build professional, like production-ready software, not vibe code slop. I mean, like professional code. Like we're building semi-professional code here. We're not going through literally all the hoops you would for that. It's pretty professional code. I mean, we are making sure that we're building it properly and architecting it properly.
But I think that is more experience. Like if you think about it from a standpoint of like we always go back to being a craftsman, right? Of like that's hours and hours and hours of
not
time.
Everyone agrees that coding is craftsman, but I think it is.
It depends on how you approach it, right? Like if the approach is that you're building things that most people might not pay attention to or might not even see, right? The whole like paint underneath the inside the drawer was one of the terms that I think it was a Steve Jobs line or something like that, where nobody in their right mind would care, but on some level they feel it, right? In terms of like, hey, I don't know, like it's like being taken care of by like a good chef or a I don't know how to describe.
Well, it's the difference between. Well, I mean, it's the hallmark of professionalism, of being a professional.
Yeah.
To a degree, and being a craftsman. And the other half of what I was saying earlier was, it's like you need to already have experience to use these tools, but you can't get the experience if you use them. If you're early in your career, especially, this is why schools, I think, should not use these. And this is like a position I've had my entire life, that schools should not use computer technology in the classroom without thinking very hard and long on it. And I got into arguments with teachers in high school about this because I wrote about it, and I was like, yeah, you shouldn't be having computers in the classroom, because we even knew way back then that if you basically outsource your thinking to machines in various ways, that you're not going to learn. It's like, what's the point of school if you're not doing the intellectual labor. The labor part is actually important. It's what allows you to learn and grow and then have the understanding to be able to use the sophisticated tool, the automation tool that is an LLM like this. Mm-hmm. And with how do you get that if you don't go through the pain? And I feel like we're very quickly rushing towards like not doing anything, like not going through that labor and then not learning it. So new people are going to be worse off and they're going to have a harder time, I think, coming to become experts in this stuff. And I still think it's going to be important to be an expert in this because ultimately, no matter how sophisticated these tools become in outputting decent code for whatever, some human being still has to direct them. Some human being has to be accountable most of all. There's always going to be a human being accountable because you can't hold a machine accountable for anything. You can't sue a machine. You can't go to a machine for restitution for harm or something. Like, we live in a world built for humans, and like we have a legal system for humans. So ultimately, someone's going to have to be held responsible for what a machine outputs, and so you can't. And if you're gonna have that someone be responsible, then someone has to understand what the hell is being output by these things and say, yes, this is okay. I put my stamp on this. So how are you going to do that if you don't even understand what it's spitting out?
I guess it's weird because, one of the, having worked as a contractor, a fair bit for about 8 years, I would always joke, like, when you ask us to write tests are great until the client says, hey, how come you're taking too long on this thing? You're wasting me money. Now, I mean, this is only tangentially related, but it's kind of one of those things where the people in charge, or the way I look at it is my clients don't care about the quality as much as I do. It's my job to care, but I think that they, because I want to make sure that the code itself is in good shape should they pivot or should they change their mind, which they're going to tend to do. To anticipate those situations. But a client will inevitably go, I don't care about these tests. They don't have quote-unquote business value. I just need these things as fast as possible. I need you to output quickly and then, quality be damned.
Yeah, well, I think that this is the mark of a professional is to know what your client doesn't know that is important, and sometimes to educate the client or to insist on it. You're going to be like, look, you may not have thought about this consequence of this. I mean, it seems like we're going slower, but in actual fact, if we don't do this, then the consequence could be more time consuming or expensive, or it could be a liability issue, or it could be something else. And as a professional, you're supposed to know this. And I guess the hope is that you'll bake in enough examples of code that the LLMs will just spit out what code that is always perfectly compliant with all of these trade-offs. But it can't, because every particular project is different and has different trade-offs that need to be made among dimensions outside of code, including things like quote-unquote quality and craftsmanship, and like, what does that mean for this project, and what level of of risk are we willing to take in certain areas, and I just feel like, how are you gonna be a professional and be able to help with understanding, help the product owner, or whatever you want to call them, the client, make those trade-offs? How are you going to give proper advice if you have never built the things and never built anything? If you just had a machine doing it for you and just accepting what the machine gave you, what standard are you using to evaluate the output of the machine? If you've never, if you don't actually understand, because you haven't gone through the intellectual labor. So these are my thoughts right now. They're not, fully baked. I think we're all in the process of thinking about this. At least I think if you have any self-awareness, you're thinking very carefully about this when you're using these tools, because they feel like a loaded handgun. And I feel like, and Or maybe like a bomb that has a timer on it, but you don't know when it's going to go off, and it could be like years from now, and you needed to know how to do something maybe, and you don't know because you never learned it. You know what I mean? So
I think selfishly for me, like when I used to do game jams, it's tough for a lot of people, especially, I would do these 2-week game jams and like get as many people on my team as possible. I mean, like Aaron would know. And not many people everybody has a day job. Everybody, can't do as much, commit as much time to the game, making a game for like a 2-week sprint. So, there'll be some significant drop off. And a lot of times if I'm using like something like, I think that at the time it was Trello to do the project planning, just a quick and dirty project plan, like people would drop off. It's like, I'm sorry, I can't do the music. I'm like, all right, well, I'll do it, right? And a lot of times it's not because, and the way I always rationalized it in my mind was like, well, hey, look, this was all about like building experience. We're not making money off of this game. There's a very small likeliness that we'll actually produce and push this out on an app store or the Steam store, right? So like, let's just have fun and learn something. So if you don't want to do it, hey, I'll take the learning experience, and that'll be a win for me, and it's your loss, kind of the way I approached it.
Right.
So it's the same way I feel about like LLMs. Is like, yeah, they're great. I'm sure they do a lot of things more efficiently, but I want to learn the proper way to crack this egg or whatever. Right? Like I want to be the one to get this victory. Exactly.
And it's like, when do you make that trade-off? Because that's what you're doing. You're trading off that. Yeah. You're trading off that learning, that deeper learning, for expediency, speed, and it's like I think we're being pretty good with this project with where we're trading that off, because I think I'm mostly using it to refactor things, and as I said before, it's basically just making small modifications to what we wrote a while ago.
It's not like, I think one of the things that, at the very least, it's good to know, even this in and of itself is learning.
Yeah, it's learning a different thing.
Yeah, and
like I'm learning how to use the tools, the LLM tools and Aider and stuff, but I'm not necessarily learning the ins and outs of the HealthKit framework, because I'm not reading the documentation like you traditionally would be doing, and just like studying that and trying to figure it out by hand. If as much,
for whatever reason, something is in that code that long term causes a lot of pain, that would be one of those things where you hope that Aider can aid you in.
Well, that's what people say. I mean, I think that's what people assume. Like, well, if the LLM is generating like slop code only an LLM can understand, then you use an LLM in the future to understand. And it's like, that's not a good future. It's not good if you can't understand what it's doing. I mean, it's not good if it's generating code that you can't reason about yourself.
I mean, the problem is, at least in its current form, if I say, no, you're wrong, right? Like we were goofing around with it the other day. It was like, you're absolutely right. Here's another question. Like, no, that's wrong too.
Yeah, it's always like trying to be helpful.
Oh, you're actually right. Yeah, so it's trying to be helpful, and yet it confidently tells you a different story. It's like it's like literally like lying to your face.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think with LLMs, we're talking about using it for code generation, which is, as you said, I am not like a hype man about this stuff. I think it's useful, but it's more limited than the AI bros make it out to be, and it's very much dependent on the type of work you're doing. Like I see professionals in like game development who are not finding it all that useful. And I think in mobile development, it has like medium utility. I think like stuff like this, like HealthKit, or like things, repetitive boilerplatey code, we'll call it. It's good at that, but it's not so great at larger scale things. And so far in SwiftUI, it's okay. I mean, in my experience with it, it's not the best thing ever. But in web development, like a lot of React-based stuff, it seems to be much better, because there's a lot of you're writing like the same patterns over and over again. So it seems to be better at a lot of that stuff. But I'm not a web developer, so I can't really say how good it is or not at that level. But it depends. But I do think that there's other use cases that Apple is on the forefront of that we're only just beginning to look at. Like we've been playing with the foundation model, and we'll have more to report about this as the beta period goes on. But the foundation model framework in 26, it's a model that I've seen people making fun of because like, oh, it doesn't have all this information. It's real small, but that's not what it's for. It's for like text processing and categorization. Like, let's see what we can do. It's on your device. It's super fast. We were playing around with it at Side Project Saturday on your iPad. The immediacy, you immediately get tokens back. It's like, it's very fast at doing something, unless you confuse it like we did. We did cause it to crash many times.
But if you're doing it, if you keep your session short, or if you like lock in the input, to some, then and it should be fine.
Not
like
a chat interface.
Not a chat interface.
I think the chat interface is overdone. I think it's like, if you're going to use this thing, I think it's best to, as you said, you want to, it's what it's really going to be good at is you give it certain Swift structures and you expect certain Swift structures out, and it can guarantee that. It can process that very efficiently. That's really useful, and it's all on device and very fast. And it's going to do that brilliantly. It's not going to be good as a Google replacement, but it's not trying to be. So, and this is just one example. This is just the first time on the Apple platforms that we have access to an API like this. And obviously, developers on other platforms, the web and stuff, have been using the online models for longer. But on mobile, I don't know where it's going to go yet, but like on mobile, Apple is positioned, if local LLMs have real utility, like they really offer something for users that has better trade-offs for users that they prefer over like an online models for something, then Apple is the best positioned platform vendor. And they're just going to take a little while to get the architecture in there. So like next year we'll have more access, and the year after that we'll have more access, etc.
This is probably the first, at least, I think when they introduced Apple Intelligence, they didn't really expose the foundation model or whatever, the local intelligent model at all, right? So this is the first time that they did that, and I think that is kind of what. But it wasn't even just that; it was just the fact that the ease for which you can develop off of that model is quite nice. Like the APIs,
you don't need any backend.
Yeah.
You don't need an online backend. You don't need to worry about API keys. You don't need to worry about the cost. It's all
no cost.
And next year, it was heavily hinted that next year they're going to have their private cloud compute be accessible from the API. Right now, it's accessible in shortcuts.
Oh, interesting.
But we can experiment in there to a limited degree. But it's not. But it was hinted pretty strong, I think, that next year they'll add that. And they're probably because they have to build the data center. I don't know. I feel like Apple is like pretty. I don't know where they are in the hardware setup and for this stuff, but I think Apple has unbelievable lead on edge compute resources for like LM inference on your edge device on your phone. It's in your pocket. Like if and the big question is if that translates to like really useful products, really useful tools, experiences, whatever, for end users that make them want to part with their money, then Apple is going to be huge. And if, in fact, it goes the other way and nobody cares about the local models as much and they care about the big, beefy online models, then Apple's in more trouble because they're not going to be able to compete at the same level, and they're not going to try, I don't think. So,
I mean, the way I look at it is like for the next probably 2 years or something, the price of these LLMs are going to be relatively small until all the the dust settles and there's one of the two big ones, right? It could be either OpenAI and or Microsoft or Google, whatever, right? One of these, it could be something out of that field, right? Like Amazon or Grok or whatever, right?
I'll say I get very similar responses from almost all the models I do sometimes, like for Swift code anyway. Like you can tell when there's not a lot of data in there comparative to other things. Like, sometimes, these models will give you different things each time sometimes, but often I will get like even not even just code. Like I was using T3 chat which is another product. It's not a sponsor or anything, but I've been using them. They're like a website wrapper around a bunch of models, like a chat interface. So the very first, I was using a bunch of different models because I was trying to come up with branding for another project I'm thinking about, right? For like a podcast project outside of this one. And I'm trying to come up with like domain names and stuff like that. And they have an option in T3 chat to like take your prompt and send it to another model, like with one click, and then I think it gives the whole context in. So you could just try different models out like in line and see what their responses are. And I swear to you, they gave me like very similar responses for a lot of my queries. And it's leading me to think that they have kind of plateaued, and they're all kind of, because they all use the same data, I guess, essentially, more or less. So it's like they're all kind of in a similar space. There's some differences, and there's some tweaks that they make to what they are best at or whatever. But sometimes I've gotten like eerily similar results using the same prompt, and it's just like I think maybe at some point it just won't matter as much what model you're using, is what I'm saying, and that they'll just become cheaper and they'll become a commodity. Not good for like OpenAI or Anthropic if what they're selling right now is how quote unquote good is a model. But I think that's why they're moving towards these other things, like these other interfaces like Claude Code and stuff that are providing more value on top of the LLMs, like orchestrating them and to do more things. That's what they're trying to get to. So we will see how it all shakes out. It's going to be a ride though for the next couple years.
Still at least. Early days.
It's still very early days, especially for Apple developers. We're always like behind the curve. You know, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's just the way it is.
I don't know.
No, I think it's not. I think we're more skeptical of hype because of that. because like if Apple hasn't done it, it's like doesn't exist to us.
It's like the way I think about option trading, right? Like I have no idea how that system works, and it's like the biggest hype ever, and but it's like the easiest way to lose a ton of money, like because it's hard to understand. Only crazy people actually are willing to like go through the hell of like really deep diving into day trading to optimize that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Apple developers, we're just kind of, we go more with like, what is Apple doing? We care less about what the wider industry is doing sometimes.
Yeah.
Like when Apple gets to it, they would care.
But yeah, but I think it's something that we can, it keeps us focused. The way I looked at it, like we can focus on the solutions that we're trying to actually make versus like whatever is on the hype train.
I just set up my dad with a phone and his wife they just got these new 16Es. And I was like, why'd you get a 16? And it's like, because it was free. I was like, okay, that makes sense. And they gave it to him free. So I just set them up. And, they're like the most normie of normie users of these phones. And they do not understand or care about LLMs or Apple Intelligence. They don't understand any of this stuff. They care about, like, you know what they care about? Can I get to the camera app? Honestly, I'm like terrified that when iOS 26 comes out and they see what they did to the camera app, they're going to be really pissed. I don't know. And the like something like the camera app, I guess my point is like Apple makes software for those people, for my dad. Mm-hmm. They're not making it for the developers, us. Like the camera app is designed apparently by people who are like professional photographers and stuff, like they are, or big photography people, but like its user interface, its feature set, the way they expose it and stuff is meant to hit the billion people or whatever that have Apple devices, people that are more like my dad than they are like us in terms of technical expertise and understanding and like and caring about all the latest trends. And so I think that Apple being careful about this stuff and Apple developers being a little slower to adopt things usually has always worked out well, because you end up with like a more thoughtful and polished and tasteful implementation. That's what I hope we end up with. There was a little rough there with Apple Intelligence, and they jumped a little too fast, and they bit off a little more than they could chew in 1 year. But
they were on the FOMO train for a split second.
I mean, Apple. I mean, the FOMO for AI is so intense that even Apple couldn't resist it. Yeah. But I think they've gotten their senses back. And it was a really good WWDC, and they're betting on the edge compute for AI, and that is a risk, and we'll see how it turns out. And maybe the private compute thing will work really well too. I don't know. I haven't really been able to use it, so
at least they put their stamp what is it, their stake in the sand or whatever. It's just like, hey, this is what we think.
Yeah, exactly.
It might pan out, it might not, but at least we had made a decision. The same with like Liquid UI.
I feel like after a year, they were talking about how the AI division's aimless, whatever. I think it feels like after Dub that Apple has a direction. They have a clear idea of what they're doing. They know what developers want to have access to, and they're trying to provide it. And we will see what comes out of it. I think this is going to be a pivotal year.
Indeed it is. With that, let's call it for today. But you can learn more about Philly Cocoa at phillycocoa.org. There you can find links to our Slack group, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcast platform of choice is, and share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. Today I'm once again promoting our good friend Muhammad Azam at his wonderful online course, Azam Sharp Foundation Model Framework course. It's a new course by Azam. You can go to azamsharp.teachable.com to find it. It's basically getting started with a foundation model framework. This is not a sponsor thing. We're just here to promote this cool little thing. It's a living document, so to speak. So it's kind of like a beta version of this course, but you get access to learning all the things about setting up the foundation model, doing stream responses, adding guided generations, integrating with tools, integrating with SwiftUI. There's a whole ton of stuff here, and then he starts you off with like basic examples that he's basing it off of like a recipe app. Hopefully he did not just Sherlock Clipdish. But anyway, jeez. But he also had said he has a special coupon code for our Philly Cocoa listeners. If you put a coupon code of Philly, PHILLY, you get a discount for 40%. This deal expires July 31st. If you're interested, be sure to check it out. We'll have links in our show notes. Once again, coupon code 40% off. Coupon code is Philly. So with that, till next time, good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always.
It's never a good time to buy.